Hi, it's Dr. Eric Robbins, and I'm talking to you from Los Angeles, California, and I'm excited to tell you about the power of Holosync. So let me explain what I mean by that. I was looking on my Facebook page today, and I saw a message written by a girl who I knew back in college, which was 30 years ago, and she wrote something, and she said, "My plate is full, it's overflowing, and I'm kind of overwhelmed." And a bunch of her girlfriends wrote back to her saying, "I'm sorry, and can I help, blah, blah, blah." And when I commented back to her, I said, "Why don't you get a bigger plate? Why don't you get a bigger plate so you can handle more stuff?" Now, I think a lot of her friends after my comment wrote a bunch of stuff, and they thought I was being flippant and this type thing. But what do I mean by that? Why don't you get a bigger plate? So I'll tell you a story. Years ago, when I was going through some personal crises and marital issues, I went to this therapist who was actually a fairly famous therapist here in Los Angeles, and he used to see a lot of famous people and famous doctors and famous he was a psychologist, and he said to me one time, he goes, "Eric, you're basically getting by on 5%. You're getting by on 5%." And I think in hindsight, what he meant by that is that I was basically 5% of my life's energy was flowing and allowing me to live life, basically, and 95% of my energy was blocked and stuck and not able to flow. And that's why I was pretty miserable and pretty exhausted and chronically fatigued and really run down and always depleted and didn't have enough energy for myself and for my family and that type thing. So, any of you guys who've been following me on video know that I'm a fan of Gay Hendricks. And Gay's a friend of mine. He's a PhD psychologist, and he's written a lot about body-centered psychotherapy. And basically what that means is that he believes that one should be able to clear psychological problems at a level where you actually feel that shift inside your body and feel better in the body. I think in the front cover of one of his books, he says, we don't need to transcend our body to have a spiritual experience. We can have it right now, and feel it inside. So at any rate, I don't know if any of you have a person or a role model or a mentor in your life that if they recommend something to you, you just do it unabashedly. The only guy in my life that could recommend something, I'd immediately check it out without even giving it a second thought, was Gay Hendricks. So he sent me an email one time and recommended something called Holosync. And it's a form of sound technology. I'm going to explain a lot more about it because Holosync single-handedly changed my life more than anything else I've ever done. It's not an overnight process necessarily, but it really is life-transforming. So this is the model of Holosync. It's explained by its developer, who's a guy named Bill Harris, who's a good guy and a friend of mine also. And guys, by the way, anything I recommend in any of these videos, I don't have my own website. I'm not an affiliate. I don't make money by referring you somewhere, and I usually don't talk about or refer folks to things that I myself don't do. So I don't have a website. I'm not making money off recommending any products. I just do recommend things that have helped me. So Bill Harris, who developed Holosync, describes a psychological model in the following way. He says, all of us, our nervous systems have a threshold or limit to how much stuff we can handle coming at us from life. And if life gives us more stuff, than we can handle, then we kind of get pushed over that threshold. Our nervous system can't handle anymore. And when we get pushed over our threshold, that creates this kind of generic internal stress, anxiety feeling. And then we all learn how to cope with that differently, depending on how we learn to respond to things as kids. So for example, when some people are pushed above threshold, they get angry and pissed off all the time. Other people like to isolate themselves. Other people feel anxious. Other people feel depressed. For a lot of people, they handle being pushed over what their nervous system can handle by doing any one of a number of addictive behaviors. So you can name it. Sex, drinking, drugs, gambling, shopping, working out. All those things are secondary to getting pushed over that threshold. Now, the second thing that's very interesting is that they've shown that if you had a dysfunctional childhood, if you had an abusive childhood, if they do PET scans of your brain, they can actually see changes in your nervous system that basically translate into your neurologic stress threshold being a lot lower maybe than somebody else's. So in my case, what I noticed and what I think Dr. Kaufman, my psychologist friend, was referring to in me was that my neurologic stress threshold was so low that 95% of the time I was getting pushed over threshold and basically felt like crap, felt overwhelmed. The way I'd respond to it would be to isolate myself. I'd be kind of anxious, that type of thing. Now, the other interesting thing, and I'll share this in the way of a story, is this. A number of years ago, I was talking to a neurologist friend of mine, and I told this guy, I said, you know what, I think migraine headaches are secondary to stress. And this neurologist responded back to me, and he said, well, that can't be true, he said, because a lot of my migraine headache patients get migraine headaches when they're on vacation. And it took me a long time to figure out what was going on with that. What I've subsequently realized, and something that Gay Hendricks talks about, is something called the upper limits problem. And the deal with that is that, everybody can pretty much understand how negative stuff and stress and past events and family troubles and money troubles, all that kind of stuff are, negative things that can push us over our neurologic stress threshold. What Gay Hendricks pointed out is that for a lot of us, positive things, positive energy also is stuff and can also kind of feel negative to us. So for example, if you have an upper limits problem, if you have things in your life like, for example, love and intimacy are big dosages of positive energy, as is having good health, as is maybe having financial success and stability. And so if someone's nervous system, if your nervous threshold is low, these seemingly positive things can also push you over that threshold and actually feel bad. Now, Gay Hendricks describes a couple scenarios I'm going to tell you about, because I certainly noticed these in myself, and most people who I've told these about either notice it in themselves or know somebody real well who they've seen this pattern in. So you can think, for example, like a couple's going to go away on a romantic 3-day weekend, and right before they leave to go away, a fight breaks out. And it's true, on one level of truth, you could say, well, she was being a blah, 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 and he was being a pain in the butt, and, there's all these reasons why the fight broke out. At a higher level of truth, you could say the fight had to break out to limit the amount of positive energy that they would have, had on this romantic 3-day weekend. Or I remember at other times, it's like somebody will get ready to take a 1 or 2 week vacation from work, and right before the vacation starts, they get sick. And again, on one level of truth, yeah, the person really did get sick. They have a flu, a cold, whatever. On another level of truth, you could say the illness had to happen to limit the amount of positive energy that they may have had. Now, I can remember very distinctly back in, I think it was the year 2000, we went on a family vacation to Maui. And, we were staying at the nicest hotel in Maui. I think it was the Hyatt there in Kanapali. And, it was a beautiful place. It was a tropical paradise. We snorkeled in pristine waters. And I remember they even had this penguin exhibit in the lobby, and I love penguins. And I noticed the entire trip I was angry and pissed off and exhausted, and my wife's really a great woman, and she's beautiful and bright and really loving, and my son's a great kid. And I remember part of me was thinking to myself, man, Eric, why the hell what's wrong with you? Like, why can't you enjoy this vacation? It wasn't until a few years later I learned about the upper limits problem that I realized, that's why you can't enjoy good things. So again, whenever we get pushed over our nervous system threshold, we feel stress and anxiety, and we cope in different ways. Now, the next question this brings us to is this. At least in theory, if we can raise that threshold higher and higher and higher, at least it's conceivable in theory that if you could raise your neurologic stress threshold high enough so that you never got pushed over, then all those dysfunctional feelings and behaviors like anger, isolation, anxiety, depression, the addictive behaviors would seemingly just be able to float off and disappear. They wouldn't be issues in our life anymore. We might begin to feel much, much more relaxed. And so that's the idea of Holosync. So what is Holosync? Well, I'll give you a little background. back in the 70s, they did studies of these very advanced yogis, and we're talking about guys who meditated for 6 hours a day for 15 years, and these guys were extremely calm and peaceful and expansive all the time, and their energy flowed, and they really almost never got stressed out and that type of thing. But it took them meditating 6 hours a day for 15 years to be able to get to that state. And they hooked these yogis up to an EEG machine and measured their brainwaves. So a little background on brainwaves. Right now we're talking, and assuming I'm keeping you somewhat awake, normal waking brainwaves are called beta waves. And they're these little small waves, and let me see if I can position my finger. And they're little small waves, they're fast, but they're little small waveforms. When you start going to sleep, when you're in a pre-sleep state or a hypnosis state, you fall into alpha waves. Alpha waves, let me get my finger, are a little bit bigger. Alpha waves are a little bit bigger. They're slower, but a little bit bigger waves. The next level is theta. Theta is what happens when we're in fairly deep sleep or in REM sleep or something like that. So theta waves are even bigger. They're slow, but they're a little bit bigger. The fourth brainwave state is delta. So normally delta waves are only found when we're having deep, dreamless sleep. Delta waves are really slow, but they're these huge waveforms that contain a tremendous amount of energy. Okay, so when they did EEG studies on these yogis, they found that these yogis were able to go into a meditative state and maintain their conscious awareness while they lower their brainwaves down from beta to alpha to theta to delta. So the significance of that is they were able to maintain conscious awareness while holding their brainwaves in a delta state. Because these delta waves contain a tremendous amount of energy, it's almost like these yogis were able to get into a brainwave pattern that would force their brains to have to handle a lot more energy than the brain's normally able to handle. And the brain had to get used to handling that kind of energy, and it made some neurologic changes. Their nervous system actually made changes that allowed them to handle more stuff coming at them from life because they were training their brain waves to kind of stay awake while they were in delta waves. So that's an extremely significant discovery. The next most significant discovery is that some scientists several years later found that if you put stereo headphones on somebody and you play a slightly different frequency or tone in each ear. So for example, if I had a stereo headphone on and in this ear they played 400 hertz, and in the other ear they played some tones of 405 hertz. So whatever the difference is between these two, so in this example it's 5 hertz, they found out that your brain waves would be entrained or would go to 5 hertz, which for example might be somewhere in the theta range. So basically the simple form of what I'm saying is that by using stereo headphones, there are certain sound technologies, they run certain frequencies in your ears, and they can make your brain waves go from beta to alpha to theta to delta and hold you there. So what I'm saying is there's a sound technology now where the first time you listen to this technology, it puts you and holds you in basically a delta wave state. When that happens, and so instead of spending 6 hours a day for 15 years just to be able to start getting in that state, the first time you listen to this is called binaural technology, you're able to establish these brainwave states. By holding you in delta, it forces the brain to have to handle a lot more energy than it's normally able to handle, and your brain and nervous system are forced to make changes in order to handle and accommodate this increased energy. So there's a few things that happen when that occurs. Number one, I don't know, most of you have heard that a lot of people, most of us are primarily right-brained or left-brained. And right-brained people tend to be more kind of thoughtful and intuitive and creative, and left-brained people tend to be like engineers and accountants and very logical and not too emotional. And most people are predominantly either right-brained or left-brained. As you listen to this sound wave technology, one of the ways that the brain and the nervous system is forced to change to handle the increased energy is increasing the communication between the two sides of the brain. So there's an increase in cross-hemispheric communication. The two sides of the brain start communicating with each other better, and as a result of that, you'll notice that you start thinking with a whole brain approach. And meaning instead of looking at life through either a right brain or left brain approach, you start looking at problems and issues with your whole brain. And interestingly, there's been studies that show it's very difficult to get stuck in certain patterns and stuck in problems, and it's very difficult to be stuck in anxiety or depression if you're looking at anything in your life through a whole brain approach. So I remember after I was listening to this technology for a while, I remember one day I got in an argument with my wife about something, and right in the middle of the argument, I had a kind of, I don't know, something happened in my brain, and I was able to see the argument from her side. So it's pretty hard, it's pretty difficult to argue when you can start seeing things from your opponent's side. So I said, what she's saying makes sense, and that was the end of the argument. Other things, there's other changes that happen in the nervous system as your nervous system learns to accommodate the energy. And Bill Harris likes to use the example, if you're somebody who doesn't exercise, you never exercise, and then one day a drill sergeant comes to your house and comes to your door and says, listen, you got to run 2 miles with me today. And you put on your shoes and you could barely run 100 yards, and you have to walk, and you get back after 2 miles and you're completely exhausted and everything hurts. And then the next day the drill sergeant shows up again. He says, you have to run 2 miles with me today. And if you started running 2 miles a day after several months, I think you'd agree that you might run 2 miles, and unless you ran farther faster, your body would have made changes in the nervous system and the circulatory system and with your lung capacity and all this other stuff to allow a run, which at the beginning was very difficult, to then be very easy. So what I'm proposing to you is by listening to this technology, your nervous system makes changes, and the end result is that it raises your neurologic stress threshold. Now, in English, what this means is that over time, you'll notice that you're able to live your life, and you just notice that there's less anxiety and less depression and less need to isolate yourself and less need to have any of the addictive behaviors, because all those things are secondary to feeling stressed and anxious. And so literally it's like getting a bigger plate, right? I mean, it's like if your nervous system was a small shot glass, and then all of a sudden after a few months or a year or two, your nervous system becomes like a 64-ounce big gulp. You can handle a lot more stuff coming at you from life without feeling bad. So that was exactly my experience. In fact, I'll tell you a story. Most people that use this technology, and the reason I keep saying the word Holosync, that's the product I've used. It's spelled Holosync. And I think that's a gold standard product. And I've not really found any. There's a few products that may or may not work comparably. Holosync is the one I used. They've got a 100% 1-year money-back guarantee, so I say try it, see if it'll help you. You'll be a lot happier if you do. So anyway, the very first time Gay Hendricks recommended Holosync, I bought it. I was anxious for it to arrive in the mail, and I remember I listened one morning to the CD for the very first time, and it was the day we were just getting ready to remodel our house. We were having to pack up the whole damn house and move the whole upstairs to the downstairs, or vice versa. And my wife was in kind of a little bit of a bitchy mood. And then I remember we had to get everything done because that night we had to go to a dinner party, and the only guy I knew at that party was the host, and I was kind of having a little anxiety, like who am I going to talk to and what the heck am I going to say and this and that. So I listened to Holosync that morning, and I noticed we're doing this move, and I'm doing a lot of physical labor, and I really felt pretty good in my body. I didn't feel stressed at all, and Linda was blah, 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 and yapping, and I said to myself, man, I'm not getting caught up in what she's saying like I would have for all the previous years of our marriage. And then I remember going to that dinner party that night, and I felt totally free and totally comfortable, and I wasn't like stressed or anxious at all. And I said, damn, this stuff works. Again, not everybody has that kind of amazing transformation in one day or after one listening, but that was my experience. Now, the other thing is, I remember after I'd been listening a couple months, and then I remember I was on call one Friday, and it was a crazy day on call. And we had sick patients in the hospital I had to take care of, and the emergency room kept calling, and I kept having this influx of patients in clinics, and my nurses had a million questions, and my pager kept going off, and it was a crazy, crazy day. And I remember about midway through the day thinking to myself, man, you know, I know in the past, like 2 or 3 months ago, if I had had a day like this, I'd feel stressed, you know, here and in my chest, and my head would feel tight. And I noticed I'm not feeling any of the stress in my body. So it literally created a body level shift. And I kind of had that witness perspective where I was noticing and thinking about this stuff. And that's another thing, you know, the Holosync kind of increases your witness perspective. One analogy I like to give, for those of you who are Spider-Man fans, I love the Spider-Man trilogy with Tobey Maguire. But anyway, if you remember in Spider-Man 1, Peter Parker was bitten by the radioactive spider, and he's in his high school, and he's just starting to notice that he's got these superpowers. And there's one scene where he's in the hall of the school, and he notices that his senses are kind of hyper acute, and he notices that his nervous system is speeded up so much that everything else is almost moving slowly. Like he sees like the kid blows a spit wad, and he can see it kind of going in slow motion, you know, and there's like a fly in the hall, and he sees the wings moving like this fast, because his nervous system is so adapted that everything else seems slow. So that's kind of the same realization. I had this kind of witness perspective that occurred and has continued to occur after I listened to the Holosync technology. Now the other thing is, as your nervous system is making changes to accommodate the increased energy that's flowing through it over time, certain areas of your life where you're stuck, certain limiting beliefs that you have or core beliefs that you've held your whole life, as the nervous system kind of starts to change around these things and energy starts to flow through different parts of your nervous system, it's almost as if these you kind of become more consciously aware of your beliefs and of certain stuck areas, and you're able to transition past out of them much quicker. So I remember years ago, a cancer surgeon named Dr. Bernie Siegel wrote a book called How to Live Between Office Visits. And Bernie Siegel was a great guy. One of my admonitions to my patients, and actually to my family members and to other colleagues, is this. What I think is one of the best things you can do if you have a physical disease, if you have emotional stuff, if you feel like crap most of the time, if you have chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia, you know, if you're burdened by limiting beliefs, you just feel like I'm missing something in life, there's marital issues, you feel stressed all the time, if you can't enjoy things where you notice everyone else is pretty happy and I can't seem to enjoy myself even when things are seemingly good, that's called the upper limits problem, I strongly recommend what you do, quote, between office visits or between seeing your doctor, your therapist, or just in your day-to-day life, is get this sound technology and listen. Again, there's a number of varieties that I've seen on the internet. The one I used is called Holosync. Bill Harris of Centerpoint Research, who produces this, is not paying me a cent to say this. I've got no affiliate links. I don't even have a website. This stuff will change your life. It absolutely changed my life. I've had several dozen friends and physicians and patients who I've got them turned on to Holosync, and I'll tell you, almost invariably when I go to these folks, after they've been listening anywhere from a number of months to a number of years, I'll go to them and I'll say, listen, if Bill Gates came to you and he offered to give you all the money in his bank account, you could have $50 billion of Bill Gates money, but you'd somehow have to magically go back in time and not have listened to the Holosync, what would you do? And every one of them says, I wouldn't take the money. The changes in my life have been so dramatic. I feel so good. I feel so much better. I feel great when nothing else has helped. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the power of Holosync. If I was king, I'd recommend everybody listen to it for about 4 or 5 years, and it's well worth the money. I don't think there's any substitute for listening to this type of technology, certainly for me and for many of my patients. There's a lot of other mind-body topics that I talk about, and we're posting more videos daily on YouTube. But this thing is a 5-star Robbins recommendation, and I hope you'll check it out. The website is Centerpoint. There's an E on the end of point, CENTERPOINTE.com. So guys, I hope this helps, and it's Dr. Eric Robbins signing off.